Dear ladies and gentlemen, my name is Ivan Maltsev, and I'm a general partner at 3x Capital. Today we will have an interesting session regarding Scroll, and I'm very proud to invite today Sanjith, who is a participant of our seventh cohort at 3x Education, and my mentee with whom we are working closely on weekly basis on different types of research. So Sanjit prepared a comprehensive overview of the Scroll. Scroll is one of the leading layer 2 solutions for Ethereum, and today you will know more about the technical solution, about the team, and some other topics as well. Sanjit, welcome to the stage.
Thank you, Ivan. Hello, everyone. Quick introduction from my side. I'm Sanjith. I'm currently a member of the 3x Education cohort number 7. And I've made this quick deck about Scroll. So guess we can get started. So today I will be discussing a new layer 2 zero knowledge rollup Scroll. So the things we'll be discussing today are the few basics of zkEVM, introducing Scroll, how it's different compared to other chains. We'll look at some on-chain activity and then also talk about some future developments. And for the second half, Ivan will show you how you can participate in activities in this new chain and be rewarded for it. So let's start with a small introduction about the current rollup landscape. We have optimistic rollups, the current leaders, and zero knowledge rollups, which are the future. So, key differences: optimistic rollups assume transactions are valid, zero knowledge rollups don't make any such assumptions. Instead, they use cryptography to validate transactions. This has an impact in the finality of the transaction because of assuming validity. Optimistic rollups have a delayed finality because there's a dispute period to challenge a transaction. But since zero knowledge rollups prove validity instead of simply assuming them, the transaction is instant. The finality is instant. And the third point is critical: EVM compatibility. EVM is the sandbox that runs smart contracts. For optimistic rollups, the integration is easier because of the existing nature of the virtual machine. But for zero knowledge rollups, it's a bit more risky because the behavior of the EVM has to be tweaked for it to be compatible in order to run zero knowledge proofs. A bit broader description of zkEVM: it's a combination of zero knowledge proofs and EVM. So essentially, this combination helps scale Ethereum by providing a familiar environment for developers and by using zero knowledge proofs to prove validity of transactions off chain. And this helps it decentralize and also scale by providing a higher TPS and also providing greater privacy. So not all zkEVMs are built the same. There's a categorization in place. However, even this is not a standardization. Different people have their own takes on these classifications. Similarities do exist between them, but there's no one true method to classify all of them. So this table is based on a classification by analysts at Messari. As we can see, they're split between two levels: bytecode and language. And right next to it, we have the types. To make sense of this table, it's important to understand where each of these types fit. So essentially, the closer you are to the top, the closer you are to type 1. And as we see, the consensus level provides the best developer experience, but is also the most ambitious to make. The bytecode level is a good sweet spot because it provides a good enough dev environment. But even in building something like this, it's still very challenging. And the bottom tier is the language level, which from a dev standpoint is not the best, but it's also the easiest to build. So basically, what each of these levels signify is how seamless the transition is for a developer to move from an EVM chain onto a zkEVM chain. So the higher up you are, the more seamless the transition is. The lower down you are, the more challenges there are in your transition, at least in theory. So what is bytecode compatible? For the EVM environment to support a zero knowledge implementation system, it requires some tweaks within the EVM. So we have to change the behavior of the virtual machine to enable it to run zero knowledge, for it to be capable of running a zero knowledge rollup. The problem that arises with these tweaks is, let's say I have deployed a project on Ethereum and now I want to migrate to a ZK rollup. When I'm migrating, I realize that the ZK virtual environment is throwing up errors for my code. Now, this seems odd because if I'm already deployed on Ethereum and there haven't been any issues, then why is there a problem in this migration? So this problem arises because of the tweaks that were made to the EVM for it to be converted into a ZK EVM. So some of the code that I wrote supports some parameters that the EVM supports, but the ZK EVM does not support. So now I have to rewrite my code or find a workaround for it to work. So basically, bytecode compatibility means the chances of these errors occurring is the lowest. If the EVM and the ZK EVM support all the bytecodes, I don't have to change my code and my transition is seamless. If they don't support the same bytecodes, then I have to find a workaround, and this can be an expensive process for me to rewrite my code. And also, there's a chance for me to get my code re-audited. So now that we understand just enough tech to have a basic understanding of what's under the hood, let's actually talk about Scroll. So Scroll is a ZKVM rollup. It is bytecode compatible. I've watched many interviews of various team members at Scroll, and they've driven this point home every single time. Whether it's Eat Denver, Eat CC, Dev Connect, this has been their pitch, and in their eyes, this is the big differentiator from other ZKVM rollups. So Scroll has also been in close collaboration with the Ethereum Foundation PSC team. And I think at one point, almost 50% of the code commits from the PSC team were from the team at Scroll. So just a bit about the founders. I'm sorry if I do mispronounce any of these names. That is not my intention. We have Haichin Shen. He's a co-founder, PhD in computer science, has an extensive research background, and a lot of the research that they've done has revolved around deep learning, machine learning, etc. Moving on, Sandy Peng is looking after the product development, the product team. She worked as a partner at a firm that invests and advises in Web3 ventures. And lastly, we have Yi Zhang. He's the leading researcher of the team. Prior to Scroll, he was a research and development intern at Conflux, a layer one blockchain, and he's also a published researcher. Their research revolves around ASIC GPU hardware to prove zero knowledge proofs, which they believe will be something that Scroll will eventually announce or like pivot into. So let's move on to how Scroll fares compared to other ZKVM implementations. What makes them different? So, as again, Scroll really prides itself on being the most EVM compatible, supporting the most opcodes. So you might ask, why are they talking about opcodes now and not bytecodes? Well, just from a very simple standpoint, I'm not a dev myself, but from whatever I could find, it's just that bytecodes are made of opcodes. I think that just suffices and probably is enough for us to understand what each of these chains are doing differently. So Scroll also says that everything works out of the box, meaning that they support all the bytecodes from EVM, so there's no friction when a developer has to move their project from Ethereum to Scroll or an EVM chain to Scroll. Next, we have Polygon. They currently don't support all the opcodes. So if in your Ethereum application, you're using any of these opcodes that they don't support, then when you're migrating, you might have to make a few changes or find a few workarounds. We have Linea. Now, Linea supports all opcodes, if I'm not mistaken. The team has even mentioned this in their official documentation. But the interesting thing about Linea is that it supports all the opcodes, but for an older version of Ethereum. So I think if you are a developer, that is something to definitely keep in mind. And lastly, we have Zeki Sinkera. They are confident in the design choices that they've made, And also, this is from their official documentation. They have flat out said that they are not really looking to being into being EVM equivalent, meaning supporting every single bytecode, because they don't believe it to be detrimental to the developers. And as they've mentioned, that the few workarounds and edits that you'll have to make to your code for you to migrate won't really be that much of an issue. So this is a conscious design choice taken by the team, and they're very okay with that. Now, for non developers, of course, all of these technicalities don't really seem big, because at the end of the day, we're just end users that are using dApps, interacting with the chains. So doesn't really, what's bytecode, what's opcode, all of these things might not be something that we necessarily consider. So how do we separate Scroll to its competitors? Also, being a very young chain, it's a little difficult to put it in different boxes. But one of the easiest ways is to see how much money was raised before the mainnet launch. So as we can see, all of these numbers are from CryptoRank. Scroll raised 80 million, Starknet raised 161 million, and ZK Sync raised 458 million. So a bit of side note for ZK Sync, this number also includes the launch of ZK Sync Lite, but that didn't have half the functionalities that their current era chain has. So, even with excluding that, like Scroll did raise the least amount, and they did push a product out to the public, even with the extensive tests that they've done. More on that later.
Thank you, Sanjit. I will just briefly add here that the last valuation of Scroll was around $2 billion, and they plan to have the next round probably in the Q1 next year with $3 billion valuation. So currently speaking with the team of Scroll and looking forward to see how the project will mature. So just wanted to mention that project will receive additional funding soon. And I expect to have more, at least 50 million more from 80 that they already raised. Thank you, Sanjay.
Thank you. So moving on, we'll look at some on-chain activity. Scroll, believe, has just very recently, I think it's been 50 days or so, they've transitioned from the testnet to the mainnet. So we start looking at some of the mainnet highlights. This is from the blog that Scroll posted, announcing the transition from testnet to mainnet. So over 15 months, they've had 3 testnets, and over 450K smart contracts were deployed. The team traveled to, I think it was Eat Denver, where they had rewards for developers at conferences for them to deploy on their chain. And the basic idea for this was to show the developers that the migration process is very seamless. So I remember one of the co-founders was talking about their mantra being copy, paste, and deploy. And a lot of these numbers are reflective of how the developers received Scroll at these conferences. Along with this, we have 90 million plus total transactions, 305,000 transactions, average transactions per day, 9 million plus blocks were produced, and a total of 280,000 ZK proofs were generated. So a pretty active, growing space. A lot of the focus was, as I'd mentioned, during these conferences. I think the head of BD also very recently was talking about how their pitch was getting, how every time they were pitching to developers, they found that it was getting very repetitive, because, and also the developers weren't really finding it challenging because of how easy it was to migrate on their chain. So I think these numbers are definitely reflective of the feedback that they've received. So moving on to some mainnet stats, the chain has been live for 50 days. There's been steady growth in the ecosystem. The first chart from Dune Analytics shows the data of the bridge ETH to Scroll. These charts definitely show a constant flow of bridge capital from participants to participate in the network. 27.5 thousand ETH was bridged, and the dollar value for that is 56.7 million. Now, according to L2 Beat, the current TVL is around 38 million. It has been plateauing a little, and also dipped a little because of the Kyber swap exploit. I hope none of you were at the other side of it. And if you were, my condolences. I'm very sorry for that. So, moving on to the unique addresses, we see a steady rise, but also a steady increase, but definitely a dramatic rise from, I think, 27th October until 9th November. There's been a pretty steady rise. These metrics also impact the daily transactions, as we can see that there's a pretty sharp rise and it peaks at around 9th November. Now, there is a pretty big reason for this, and it is the Scroll Origins NFT. It's Scroll's attempt to incentivize adoption by providing something that could be of value in the future in the form of an NFT. So there's three different NFT types, all with their own time period that you'll have to deploy or quest on Scroll, and you're rewarded with the different NFTs. So if you see the deadline for the first category, it's the 10th of November. And now if you see the charts, that makes sense why there was such a big peak right around that time. It signifies that there was a lot of deployment, a lot of questing, a lot of dApps are deployed, and so on, for these numbers to be reflective of how Scroll is trying to bring adoption to their chain at a very early stage. So another thing with being a new chain is reaching out to DAOs of top protocols for them to deploy on your chain. It's one thing going to dev conferences and convincing developers. It's one thing to go on interviews and say the migration process is as easy as copy paste and deploy. But the true test of this will only be apparent when the DAOs of the top protocols on chains like Ethereum are willing to deploy on your chain as well. And the team at Scroll has been um, doing good outreach in this regard. We see they've reached Aave. Of course, this is only a temp check, so there is a few more rounds before something like this is finalized. But it's good to see a team put out there and make progress when it comes to onboarding these apps. We have Uniswap, same thing, biggest DEX on Ethereum. Then we have Stargate. I believe Stargate is already deployed on Scroll, and then we have Balance, another DEX that's also, I think, is already deployed, or they did have a very successful testnet on Scroll. So what's in future for Scroll? From the tech point, it's definitely to onboard infra, because the whole idea is you onboard infra, then you onboard the developers, and then once the developers migrate their applications, that's when the users come in. So that's definitely number one on their agenda. And I think the second point is, as this is a concern for all zero knowledge rollups, that they are planning on decentralizing this architecture of the prover, verifier, etc. And finally, Scroll also plans on introducing a security council, which will be in charge of the future development that the chain will undergo. So, to summarize, as these are some clippings. One's from the CoinDesk article, which says Scroll aims to be the turtle that wins the Ethereum scaling race, but being late in this race comes with its own set of consequences. Um, I also found this very interesting. Justin Drake, a researcher from the Ethereum Foundation, has said that technology cannot be the only thing that creates adoption. He talks about the network effects as if being as, or at times more important than, these very minute discrepancies between the underlying tech. And there's a few more screenshots, both of them from Ian Greer. He talks about why he thinks Polygon will win the battle. And it's because of the brand value, the reputation, the team, the ongoing success of its POS chain. He believes the users and the devs will find it easy to transition because of how successful their original chain has been. And these network effects is essentially what I also believe to be the key driver in where developers decide to go and who eventually wins out in this ZK EVM battle. If we compare the TVL very quickly, um, I don't really have the slides, but if you do go on L2Beat, you will notice that ZK Sync Era has a TVL of 506 million. Polygon ZKVM has a TVL of 109 million. Linea has a TVL of 142 million, and Scroll has a TVL of 38.82 million. So what's next? How do we compete? How do we outdo some of these? Of course, they do have the advantage of being launched a lot earlier. So of course, Scroll being a late entry into this race, what are some things that Scroll can do to eventually catch up? Of course, reaching out to DAOs is the bare minimum, but this clipping was taken from the CT of Immutable X, which is also a ZKVM implementation, more revolving around gaming projects. And he, I think, describes it the best. Every single roll-up team is concerned about migration from Ethereum and also being supportive of the existing EVM tooling, but having the best BD team and doing the earliest or most effective marketing is also something that adds a lot of value. And if you've seen the other chains, they have done exactly that. ZK Sync, Polygon, Linea, they've all maybe overpromised, but have had the best BD, have had the best marketing, have had the best outreach. And of course, Scroll has chosen to play it slow, but now I believe is the time to really get out there, really drive the point home with the migration, the adoption of different apps, and trying to see how the ecosystem can grow. Because I think those will be the factors that will decide if you end up being number one or number four in this ZKVM race. And that is all for my presentation. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Sanjit. I personally believe that's an interesting opportunity for us to participate in the current and previous, maybe previous rounds even, if we are speaking about OTC deal. I'm curious to know your thoughts regarding the previous valuation that they had. I believe it was around $1.9 billion. Do you think it's reasonable for the current ecosystem and the status of the project, or it's more on the higher end? How do you see it?
It's a bit difficult valuing it because I don't think Polygons at KVM raised money. I think Linea did get a lot of its money from consensus. So technically, ZK Sync and Starknet were the only ones that raised. And Starknet has been in its own implementation. They've been doing their own thing. So the only real competitor is ZK Sync, and I think their valuation was eight billion, if I'm not mistaken. So just comparing and contrasting the two, just seeing how much the infra projects are raising money, it might be a bargain. But of course, one bill valuation for a chain that has not even double digits TVL seems a bit high. Triple digit TVL, my bad.
Yeah, I agree on that. I also do not remember the last valuation of ZK Sync, but I think it was around 4 billion, 4.5 or something. And for Starknet, I think it was around 8 billion. So they're one of the blockchains with the highest valuation I have ever seen. So like closer to $10 billion. We'll see how the FDV will be during the listing. So quite interesting to observe that. Thank you for your presentation, Sanjit. I'm looking forward to discuss the details on the deal memo with you during the investment committee and our next sessions. So thank you for joining. Also, we wanted to provide some practical thing for the community that you can do in order to participate in the Scroll mainnet activity, because we had a testnet phase that ended 50 days ago, as Sanjit mentioned, and right now you can breach funds to the Scroll and participate on their campaign with NFTs. So just wanted to give you high-level overview of this campaign. So you can go to the official website, and you will find the opportunity to use their bridge. This bridge works only for from Ethereum to Scroll. So if you will bridge funds, you will spend maybe even more than $20 just to bridge them to Scroll. Of course, you can do it, and maybe it will be complementary for you in the future when the team will be distributing money. But just to give you an understanding, if I will bridge 7 Ether here, it will cost me around 0.01, actually 0.2. So I think it will be around $20. So I do not suggest personally to use this. If you want to participate in their official NFT campaign, it's better to use other bridges, and I will give you a better solution right now. So they partnered with the bridge called Alto, who has an official campaign. I think Sanjith already mentioned that 2 campaigns have passed where you had an opportunity to be early adopters of the Scroll during the mainnet phase. And right now they have a cubic NFT campaign where you can bridge money from different other chains. For instance, here you can select even Starknet, Base, ZK Sync, or Arbitrum, layer 2 solutions that will offer you much cheaper opportunity to bridge. So in the case of bridging money from Arbitrum to Scroll, you will spend around, I think, around $2. So the first step will be to bridge Ethereum to Scroll. After this, you will need to deploy a smart contract. So you can see that my smart contract has been already deployed and saved here. And also, you can check your eligibility after this. On 14th of December, they will offer us an opportunity to mint Scroll Origins NFT that probably can be beneficial for us as an early adopters, because Scroll plan to launch their token in the future, and definitely they can provide some benefits for participants who tested their network in the early stages. So I suggest to think about this opportunity and maybe to use a small portion of Ether to bridge it to Scroll. So it can be like 10, 20, 30, $50 just to have this small amount and to have the first NFT on Scroll. So looking forward to hear more questions regarding Scroll and our presentation. I will go to the meeting right now, and if there will be any questions, I'm happy to provide the feedback. Yes, I see the question from Ketan. The question, is there a place to find some like-minded developers who may wish to work on some projects with Scroll? Sanjith, what do you think, where people can find developers who might be interested to work on Scroll, and how they can technically do this?
I think maybe just looking up if there's thing like maybe a hacker house near you of devs that are interested in participating in working in Scroll. Maybe you could look at GitHub commits as well to see, because Scroll has been open source. So if you could see someone has forked their code base, and maybe if you try to reach out to them and see why they'd fork their code base, what is it that they want to understand, maybe there's some synergy that you could see and try to work with them.
Also, I remember we discussed with you the program that Scroll announced during the conferences that they had this year. offering first developers some additional grants and funding. Can you please tell more? Maybe it will be interesting for our audience.
So I believe this was during ETH Denver, where they presented. It was still a testnet deployment, and they essentially had sort of three different tier systems, and rewards were split accordingly. And their idea was similarly to encourage developers of at the conference who were attending their seminar to eventually write some code, deploy, test the platform, and they were rewarded for the work that they'd done as well. So just incentivizing more coders to try it and giving them something in return.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. And I remember Scroll is providing some seamless experience for people who have already worked on Ethereum using Solidity. So can you also emphasize some main features that Scroll is offering?
So Scroll has sort of always been a chain that's very, they've been very proud of this. And of course, it is a pretty big undertaking as well, supporting all of the opcodes. I remember the day they made the transition, one of their co-founders had given an interview on CoinDesk. And that's where she mentioned that, working with Scroll is as easy as copy, paste, and deploy. That sort of tagline is just stuck in my mind. Every time I think of Scroll, I think of that. So for the transition to be so seamless from an Ethereum developing environment to a Scroll developing environment, it's, yeah, according to the people that build it and run it, they do say it's as easy as copy paste and deploy. So if there's any devs out there that want to try it, and hold them to it, that'd be fun.
Sure. Thank you, Sanjith. I think it's very valuable. So guys, do not hesitate to reach out to the team, check their GitHub, participate in different conferences where Scroll usually is very active right now. And of course, you can probably receive some grants from the team because they have 80 million raised previously, and I believe they have some token supply that will be distributed for grants. So it's a big opportunity because Scroll is still in the early days of its development. So definitely suggest to discover more of this ecosystem and communicate with key players there. Thank you, Sanjith. It was very insightful.
Thank you.
I wish you a wonderful day ahead and looking forward to work together. Thanks.
Thank you.